Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Hey, part of my microphone just fell off. How do you like that? There's the what they call the pop guard. So look out. I guess some people would call it other things, but that's the polite name for it. So if we hear a little bit extra crackling and popping, you'll know why it happened. Just literally seconds ago happened. How exciting. What a fantastic morning development. All right. Well, we're okay. Hey, look at this. Chet Sandberg wants to know if we have no show today. We just started. Are we okay? Chet, do you hear? Can you hear me now? Duh. I don't know. All right. Well, everything's supposed to be good. Justice says everything's rolling. Let's just take a look. All the buttons seem to be pressed here. All right. Well, if not, hey, well, podcast. Here we go. We start off with Bill's morning tweet. Good luck to me on this one. Daily Coast Radio is live now. Kagro X. That's me, David Waldman. This is a heavy responsibility. I save Monday from total suckitude. We'll see whether I'm able to do that. I don't know. I don't feel up to the task. I may have to go back to sleep. We'll have partial suckitude today. We're okay with chat now. Here we go. Never mind. We're out and running. Thank you very much. I see. Hey, look at this. More people than usual tweeting that they're listening this morning. Rob Dworkin, who's tweeting. Hey, you want to follow along? I like to give out people's Twitter names so you can all talk to one another while this is going on. Real Jingy. Real, R-E-A-L, J-I-N-G-Y. Hi, Rob. Good morning. He's listening this morning as well. And look at that. I already have the quote of the day. Good night, everyone. I'm taking off for the rest of the day. Bill says, part of my microphone just fell off. Not a euphemism. Okay. Everything's cool with Blue DuPage, too. Everybody's checking in. Why don't you guys do the show today? All right. I have an interesting morning already, but we're going to do the show nonetheless. I've had a nice subliminal typo mistake that went out today talking about Coke Industries. See if you can guess what I spelled wrong when that one went on. I guess they're looking at Carly Fiorina as a prospect to spend $1 billion on, which is fantastic. It is interesting. Pastor Dan had a great comment this morning pointing out it's tough being a billionaire in this cycle, all that money and no one to buy. There's really just nothing worth spending your money on out there. I note, by the way, that they will not be considering Carly Fiorina for CEO of any of their companies or their overall holding company. That's completely out of the question. But I guess they'll consider her for president. It's her current venture she's trying to launch now. Carly Fiorina as president.com, I guess. Buy the app today. You can get it. I don't know what she's up to, but she really cooled off over the weekend. But I think news of the shooting in Oregon and the post-shooting analysis, and hi, Rebecca Roman says she's glad you're here too. I think everyone really should check in. I could spend the first 10, 20 minutes of the show reading off the names of everybody who's saying hi, and then I'll have content, and then Greg will show up, and he'll carry us for the next half hour of the show. I was noticing, though, that I guess Carly's got I don't know whether she's got a PR initiative going now, trying to sort of get back into the news. The Oregon shooting sort of pushed her out of the news, and Trump found a way to get himself in the news despite that. So I guess she's trying to do her best to get back in the headlines too. But I think things have really cooled off for her, and she got an awful lot of. She finally got the anchor of the Planned Parenthood thing around her neck. Press did the best they could, I suppose, in trying to point out that she was completely wrong about that. There were some in the written side of things that were just willing to say, yeah, fact is she's just totally lying about these things. It's the TV people have still never really gotten around to finding a way during an interview with her of saying that is so completely wrong that ordinarily we avoid calling people liars, but we're just going to be stuck with it this time. We're just, there's no escape. The trapdoor thing doesn't seem to have caught on, and I don't think it ever will. We discussed that a little bit. I did some weekend work. Those of you who are fans of the Virtually Speaking show with Jay Aykroyd, I was on yesterday And I guess it broadcast last night in their regular time slot, Sundays, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We actually taped this one ahead of time, which was a nice change of pace. I think I like doing that. I like doing the live thing for sure, but 9 o'clock at night is kind of an awkward time. And I guess it was kind of awkward for Jay, too. I was on with Culture of Truth, the Bobble Speak feature writer who's actually a part of their show every week with the most ridiculous thing that happened on Sunday, and it must be a hell of a job to pick the most ridiculous thing to have happened on a Sunday show. But of course we spoke quite a bit about the Oregon shooting and the reactions to it, and the fact that the sheriff, this continues to develop this story that the sheriff was a Sandy Hook truther, and people are shocked about that. And I think, let's see, I guess Talking Points Memo was the first one that I saw to feature it or to tell me it on Twitter. That's where I get all my news. I admit it. And they were the first ones I saw to tell me that they had caught on to this thing. New York Times caught on to it a few days later, and as is their habit, made no mention of any of the online outlets which had found that bit of news earlier. Yes, that's right. As a matter of fact, I'm reminded here, speaking of virtually speaking, that's a weird lead-in right there. Justice tells me, and I should remember this by now, that virtually speaking, in case you've never heard it, I don't know how that could possibly be, but, occasionally you miss radio programs. You're not up on every single podcast that's out there. You can, or maybe you're just extraordinarily dedicated to Netroots Radio. You listen to this show, you listen to the after show. Did you catch this morning's podcast of Hopping Mad with Arliss Bunny and Will McLeod? If you didn't, you can get it at their website. I am hoppingmad.com, so you can find that there. But if you have had difficulty ever or thought, I would like to listen to Virtually Speaking, but just don't know where to turn, the answer is Netroots Radio. Netroots Radio plays the Virtually Speaking program from any given Sunday on the following, I guess, Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You figure it out for wherever you are. You know the drill. 7 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. So 2 days later, you'll have heard us all talk about what a great show it was, and you'll want to catch up on it, and you forget on Monday, but don't worry because it doesn't come on until Tuesday. Everything fits perfectly. All right, let's see. We've got, look at this. I've got a number of bits sent ahead of time from Greg, who's no doubt getting ready to join us at any minute. I like the way he delineates between what we talked about last week and today with the big Monday. I need that read like was this a colloquial thing when you we had radio ads for, I guess, the local drag races and funny car shows, and they had that. It was usually on Sunday, and they had this announcer that had that wild voice. Sunday. I don't know whether they still do that or whether he's moved on to monster trucks these days or what, but that was certainly a northeastern thing growing up. You tell me if you heard the same nonsense going on when you were a kid, or whether they still do it. For all I know, it's still happening. I don't get to listen to the radio or watch television for my own sake. I only know what the kids watch. They have taken over all of my electronic devices. All right, let's see. Just a quick review. I'll open up Pocket. I know I put a bunch of things aside. There's plenty that developed over the weekend, stuff that we've left for weeks that haven't had a chance to talk about. Some more detail about Carly Fiorina and her campaign. All the news is bad for her. All the headlines, at least in my part of news world, for Carly Fiorina. But I guess getting her name back in the headlines after the craziness of the shooting is something. You know, they always say all publicity is good publicity as long as they spell your name right. And that's not an easy one to spell right, so I guess that's particularly good news. Washington Post has a story about her having had money problems in her previous campaigns, and that's supposed to be a surprise. It's not. She has no problem getting a hold of money for herself. The problem is that she doesn't pay people who work for her, and that's been the case since, so I don't know, probably Lucent and HP. So no surprise there, but always interesting to fill in the details. Greg Dworkin is here. Greg Dworkin always pays his bills on time. That's why he's here now. Good morning, Greg.
I do, but I don't pay Carly's bills.
Well, you don't have to. That's her personal responsibility, and as you know, she always takes personal responsibility for everything.
Right, except if one of her pollsters dies of a heart attack and then she loses and then she decides not to pay the last bill to the family.
Wasn't that nice? That was a particularly good story.
She's such a nice person.
Condolences to you, but not any money. Yeah, I think so. What, she withheld a $30,000 payday from the widow of her pollster.
Who basically, according to the story, had a heart attack surrounded by her polls, really went down with the ship for her in a effort. And she said, oh, well, we lost. Why should we pay you too bad?
Although I will say I have a certain amount of interest in that approach. If we lost, why should we pay you? It's ultra-capitalist, and you'd think it would apply to
Well, she's an ultra-capitalist.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing about the story is it tells you everything you need to know about her and what she's doing. And that's why, the people at HP hated her, at least the engineers and the folks who actually cared about the company, whereas the marketers loved her because, it's all about capitalism, right?
Yeah. I mean, you can't win as a Republican. Well, I hope you don't win as a candidate. But it is interesting. On the one hand, you have the Mitt Romney campaign who paid everyone very generously who worked for him, maybe too generously in some cases, even though they lost, and everyone began to suspect, hey, this smells like a scam of some sort. And then you have Carly Fiorina who says, well, I didn't win, so why should I have to pay you? And, of course, that sort of feels like you're being cheap and a skinflint about it, and you are, and you shouldn't be able to get away with it. But I don't know, there's a certain amount of logic to it. Terrible, evil logic.
It is, but, it's kind of weird and unusual in the following sense. Romney lost, and he certainly had his famous 47% remark.
Yeah.
And I'm in no way making the case that Romney was a champion of the working class. He wasn't. But I think even during the campaign, in the middle of the campaign, after the campaign, personally, nice guy. I think that everybody, didn't have like this guy is evil and gives off bad vibes of, happily pushing the button, dropping everybody into a vat of acid unless it was business, But at home, with his own people, nice person.
Okay.
You can't say that about Carly. Nothing about her that's nice. Nothing.
Yeah, well, I certainly haven't seen anything. I haven't seen anybody say she's really just terrific. I've seen people say, I made a lot of money off of her thing, and I'm glad I did that, but... Well,
that's one thing. But, taking capitalism to the, capital C and saying, if I lose it, I don't have to pay you. But, of course, she ran for president, and now she decided in the end, a week before she ran for president, maybe I should pay these people. I don't want this to be a story.
Yeah.
I mean, she's just a rotten person.
Pretty much. She's really rather amazing. We should run government like that, too, right? If we lose or if something doesn't come out right, everybody who worked on it doesn't get paid?
Something like that. So in terms of campaigning, a couple of things I think we do need to mention, just because it happened over the weekend, and I think it's worthwhile.
Okay.
Start with Bernie Sanders, who's running tremendously huge.
He says huge, too.
Crowds.
Yes.
I mean, filled it to capacity and beyond in Boston. Now, like yard signs, crowds aren't necessarily votes, but there's polling out, and people often berate me, criticize me, question me about why I present that too. In terms of why I present things the way I do when we're talking about the Democratic side of things, and that's because I think Hillary's going to be the nominee. And I say that not because I prefer her to Bernie, but because I'm looking at the poll numbers. And I'm looking at other things besides the poll numbers that make me think that. But let's stick with the poll numbers for now. IBD Tip out over the weekend, USA Today Suffolk out over the weekend, Pew Research, which had a really fascinating poll because it was open-ended. Usually a poll says, of the following people, who do you want for president? And Pew decided to do it differently. They said, who do you want for president? We're not giving you any prompts.
Oh, that
you
is
just
interesting.
have to guess. Okay, if you know who they are, great.
Okay.
So they basically got the
smart
same
people
numbers as everybody else except for one difference. Okay, so right now I'm looking at the RCP, Real Clear Politics average. I usually post, but they haven't updated. So RCP average right now: Clinton's 41.5, Sanders 25.4, Biden 18.8. That's a 16.1 advantage for Clinton. In the IBD tip poll over the weekend, 20 points for Clinton. USA Today Suffolk, 18 points for Clinton. Pew Research, 21 points for Clinton. So basically, over the last 2 months, 3 months, it's been a basically static and steady race, as well as Bernie is doing in terms of fundraising and crowds. The polls aren't changing that much. He's ahead in New Hampshire. He still trails in Iowa. And nationally, he's down by about 16 points. What's fascinating about the Pew poll is that when they asked, give me who you think you're going to vote for, looking at those numbers, Clinton got her usual. She's 45. And Bernie got his usual. He's 24. Biden got an 8. It is by far the lowest number of any poll. And I think that I don't have it right in front of me, but the undecideds were close to 21, 22%. So in other words, when you ask an open-ended poll, you get a proper number of undecideds, and it makes you scratch your head at all these other polls that have undecided at 2.
Oh, yeah.
What they're doing is they're pushing people to decide even if they're undecided. And I think undecided over 20 is probably right, given how early it is. And yet, with that, Clinton gets the same numbers, Sanders gets the same numbers. It's Biden who, if you don't push him, doesn't get big numbers. I just think that's fascinating.
Yeah. Well,
he's the guy that's not running, by the way.
Right. That's the other, and that's why the number I think is probably closer to correct. If you sort of declare for him that he's running by asking, and which one would you vote for, Clinton, Sanders, or Biden? Then people say, oh, well, okay, he's in, and maybe they decide to vote for him, maybe they don't. But if you just leave it up to them, they know that they read in the news. I don't see his name as running. So
right. So on the Republican side, Trump had his peak at 30.5 a little while back. Now he's down to 22.8. And everybody else is kind of flat. Nobody's really surging. The Carson surge is over. He peaked at 20. Now he's at 17. The Fiorina, who we were just talking about, is holding steady at around 11. The great establishment hope, Marco Rubio, is at 9.5. Bush at 8.3. Lots of stories over the weekend about Bush donors getting a little panicky, which they should. He's just simply not a very good campaigner.
No.
And that's partly with the ousting of Walker, the reason that Koch Industries is looking to see if they can buy somebody else off the shelf, and they're having a little finding who they want. But getting back to the Democrats, so you have those poll numbers, which is pretty steady and solid. And then you have other things, very interesting article, I thought, from AP today, seeking candidates to love and voters find they like Clinton. Mm-hmm. And again, this is not taking anything away from Bernie, but Clinton's campaign is going to be thus, and that's why I'm talking about it. She's not going to come across as a warm and fuzzy, I am adhering to you because of cult of personality.
Okay.
It's going to be pragmatic. I think this person can win. I'm okay with their policy kind of stuff. It's going to be a slog, and it's going to be a slog from now until she gets the nomination or somebody else does. And that's what you have to expect. She's not going to match Bernie's crowd. She's not going to match Bernie's enthusiasm. But she is going to have a bigger national structure that's already in place. She's going to have the polls. She's going to have funding. Bernie will have funding. That's the other story from the weekend. Bernie's got great numbers in terms of funding, and he'll be able to keep up. He's going to start building a national campaign, but it's going to have to start now. And so he's got a lot of catch-up work to do. So you have that. You have her Saturday Night Live appearance, which actually I thought was pretty good.
Okay. I didn't see, but, I never see anything.
Yeah, this is a 2.5-minute skit. You can get it online. It's actually pretty amusing.
Got good reviews.
Yeah, got good reviews. The ratings for Saturday Night Live for their opening show were okay. It wasn't the most awesomest ever, but it wasn't the worst ever. And, she's got a town hall going on being broadcast live this morning, which I watched some of on the Today Show. So that's reaching a rather large audience. And she's pretty good in those local settings. She refused when given the bait to attack Bernie, and Bernie, of course, refuses to attack her. They want to talk about policy. It's a wonderful thing. Very different than what you see on the Republican side. And Hillary made the case that, the differences between her and Bernie are small compared to the differences between her, Bernie, on the one hand, and the Republicans on the other. Biden's name never even came up. So, that's where it is and how it is. And then you go and you look at the odds makers and see what they say. They still have a Democratic win 58-42. I'm looking at PredictWise. And on the Democratic side, they've got Hillary at 69% chance of winning, Biden at 16, Bernie at 12. So they don't really, the money isn't flowing in terms of betting who's going to win on the Bernie side. That's just, again, the way it is. Can that change? Can it be forced to change because people feel otherwise? Absolutely. One of the fascinating things that I thought from this morning's New Hampshire town hall, and I'm sure this happens in all the town halls, is you have people who say, I heard what Bernie said about X. What do you think?
Yes.
And I think that's great. And
that's
Clinton said, this is fantastic for democracy. This is good for the Democratic Party. Ask those questions. Get both of our answers. You guys go decide. And she's right about that, even if you decide to vote for somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the point of Bernie Sanders having run, but really anybody.
But it's also the old point of old-style politics.
Yeah, yeah.
What are your policies? As opposed to personalities, which is what you see on the Republican side. So really, really fascinating contrast. And I think that personality wins short-term and policy wins long-term.
Okay. Well, I like long-term winning.
Yeah, me too. Anyway, so there's that. Interesting other things that come up today because I think they're going to be worth talking about. And I did catch a little bit of the Hopping Mad broadcast just before your show. And I like to listen to it Monday mornings, except I can't because I'm generally preparing for your show.
Ah.
But I try to catch at least a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I have that problem too.
Arliss was interviewing Joe Firestone, who wrote a book about balanced trade versus fair trade. And I think highly relevant because I see this morning a breaking story: deal reached in Pacific Rim Trade Pact.
Yes, that's a lot of tweets this morning about this thing moving forward.
Right.
Pictures of cows apparently from the Canadian press. I'm not sure why that happened, but okay.
I don't know either, but I think that if you probably looked at the rural parts of Connecticut, I think all their stories are obligated to have pictures of cows.
Oh, all right. Well, don't forget to tip your cow. Ladies and gentlemen.
You do, right. But the brief story here, the United States, Japan, and 10 other Pacific Rim nations reached a final agreement Monday on the largest free trade accord in a generation, an ambitious effort led by the Obama administration to knit together economies across the vast region. The deal capped more than 5 years of arduous negotiations on a product central to Obama's economic agenda and potentially hand him a legacy-defining victory late in his presidency. Yet another legacy-defining victory late in his presidency, I might add. Since he's got, of course, Obamacare to go with. He's got this. He's got a number of things. He's got the economy in terms of where it is now versus where it was, the 8 million some odd jobs created in the private sector. He's got quite a bit, if he were running again, that he could run on. People get tired of individuals, however, and they always want somebody else. And, that's why we have elections.
Yes. And
that's why we have term limits.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons, at least for president. It's easy to get, as they say, overexposed as president.
Speaking of overexposed, so let's look at the individual polls for Iowa and New Hampshire. I think they're pretty interesting. People will rightly say, yeah, but national stuff isn't really where it's at. It's all about the states. So right now, the headline from NBC News, who did the Iowa and New Hampshire polling over the weekend, Trump still leads in Iowa and New Hampshire but loses ground. So in New Hampshire, Trump holds a 5-point advantage over Carly Fiorina, 21-16, followed by Jeb in third at 11. Rubio and Carson tied at 10 each. In other words, it's totally up for grabs in New Hampshire. A month ago, Trump's lead over the nearest competition, John Kasich, who was faded, was 16 points, 28-12. So Kasich has faded, had dropped. And so it's Carly, Jeb, and Marco Rubio and Ben Carson threatening Trump. That means nobody's made up their mind. That's all soft stuff. So New Hampshire, totally up for grabs. In Iowa, Trump is ahead of Carson by 5 points, 24-19. Fiorina is in third at 8. Bush at 7, and then Cruz, Rubio, and Bobby Jindal tied at 6. So in each one of these states, Bush is holding his own. Remember, that Rubio's the new hot guy that everybody's talking about. But interestingly, if you go back and look at the PredictWise data for the Republican nomination, Bush is at 31 and Rubio's at 29. At one point over the weekend, they were tied at 30. Trump's at 13. Carly's at 7. Carly's stuff coming out, I think she's peaked. I don't really think she's going to go any higher than she did. I think she got ripped by this Planned Parenthood debacle, as did Jason Chaffetz, who maybe you'll get to in terms of actually throwing his hat in for speaker.
Yeah.
But, I think it doesn't hurt him in terms of running for speaker, but I think it does hurt her in terms of running for president. She's just totally wrong and couldn't admit it, and you see that side of her personality.
Yeah, I can't believe Chaffetz is in this race. I mean, I don't know whether he thinks he's being serious or not, but yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the leadership races, which are still shaping up. Voting apparently scheduled to take place this Thursday.
Right. So if and when McCarthy wins, my question for you is, having Chaffetz as competition, does that make him stronger or weaker when he wins?
McCarthy?
Yeah.
McCarthy probably nothing happens. Nothing. I mean, it's just he gets no.
That's 10 years of Congress. Thank you.
Bounce, no nothing out of it. I mean, on the one hand, you defeat all comers. On the other hand, those comers are perhaps Louis Gohmert, Daniel Webster, and Jason Chaffetz.
But you announced that, thank you very much for being the new speaker. We still hate you.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
that's the fault. I mean, they already knew that in the conference, but
yeah. And there's already all sorts of people getting ready to try and see McCarthy ousted. It wasn't just Paul Brown, who we learned last week was list building and fundraising on a campaign from outside the House, by the way, to force him out. But I think also outside of the House, but a slightly louder voice, Laura Ingraham, adding her voice to the chorus that they need to force McCarthy out. Lots of people capitalizing on his gaffes over the end of last week and into the weekend. So,
if anybody really wants to understand what's going on in the Republican House, you really have to go back and study up on the French Revolution.
Yes, behead everyone. It's the best thing for you.
Yeah, particularly the ones who were in charge in the beginning.
Right.
So this is a New York Times piece. You may not want to click. It's early in the month,
True.
But I sent you a segment from it, I think.
Great,
half the speakers... No, I sent you something else, which we'll get to. Guns and Kansas. This one is Path to Speaker's Gavel winds through gauntlet of far right's demands. New York Times piece. So Webster and Chaffetz challenging him. I do believe the opportunity to present a principle-based, member-driven process has increased at Mr. Webster, who will probably get one vote himself. Maybe. The more opportunities I have to present these ideas, the better off I will be, because it's all about him.
Right.
Right?
Well, yes. I guess so.
But it's a secret ballot.
In the conference. Yeah, you know what? I'm not positive of that, but very likely.
Times says it is, so it must be true.
Oh, well, there you have it.
He will face his Republican colleagues in a secret ballot vote in which he needs majority support to become the party's candidate for Speaker to regain momentum, but that's just the first step. Then there's a vote on the House floor. I don't think that's secret.
No, that's definitely not secret.
That would be fun if it were secret. They should start doing that.
Sure. I think that would be great.
Maybe we could pass stuff.
It would be.
I get why they didn't want to do that, but maybe it'd be better.
Maybe. I don't know. They have a thing about secrecy there, but they do it for some very strange things.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, not that one.
Anyway, the point of all of this really is just how much blowback there was to McCarthy's comments about the Benghazi committee. This wouldn't be a story if it weren't for that. That's
true, which is amazing because, I mean, if you think about it, even in a sense, as people tried to decide whether or not it was a classic Kinsley gaffe or some other type of gaffe, what's amazing about it, having gone over the definition 100 times, he said what everyone knew to be true anyway, and yet we are forced to admit that it would not have been a story had he not said it.
And what does that tell you about the press?
The same thing it always tells us about the press. We're all sitting there watching what we know to be untrue unfold every day, and the press needs, I don't know, there needs to be some kind of secret signal that they can do on camera, whether it's rolling their eyes or just winking or something.
They figure the Republicans will win the House again in the next election, and they're afraid their sources will dry up if they actually criticize them.
Their sources of what?
I don't know. Amusement. They're not getting any policy done.
Right. So you can't get any tips early about what's going to happen in the House. All you have, all you're reporting is optics, right? There's no way of
So here's
keeping
some
people
optics
out of
for you.
optics. It's
Right? Here's the optics
visible
for you.
to everyone.
On the White House side,
Yeah.
Obama has Obamacare and the Iran deal, and apparently a new coalition to try to take Raqqa in Syria as part of foreign policy stuff. Agree or disagree, it's certainly of consequence. And TPP. And on the House side, you have people arguing about who's going to be Speaker and whether or not admitting the Benghazi Committee was a sham and a witch hunt was good or bad gaff-making.
Yeah.
That's quite a contrast.
True. That's really an amazing thing. That's what they have to offer over there.
Well, and so then we get to the presidential race, and I guess that's why the odds makers have it 58-42 Democrat.
Yeah, very likely so.
All right. How much you want to deal with this gun stuff today, I don't know.
It's always got a place.
Well, there's two pieces here that I thought were worthwhile of at least mentioning. This long Frank Bruni piece in the Sunday Review, Guns, Campuses, and Madness. I think that's what I gave you the long extract of.
Okay.
From Austin, Texas.
Huh.
So we have college students' emotional safety. We're worried about all sorts of stuff. But in Texas, Bruni writes, there's so little concern for college students' physical safety that concealed firearms will be permitted in the classrooms at public universities like the state flagship here. And this wasn't the doing or desire of administrators and faculty at the University of Texas, most of whom it seems are horrified, but of conservative Texas lawmakers on a tireless mission to loosen gun restrictions whenever, however, and wherever they can. Yeah. To be, not to be armed in Shakespeare class. Your choice.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll see things play out rather quickly there. They not only have they loosened things up, but, Texas is a place where people will not hesitate to take advantage of that right away. They're doing it right now. And we'll see how well they do in keeping the bullets where they're supposed to be. I don't know that we're going to see any shootings, but we'll see some errors.
I hope not.
Yeah, well, but, we always have to factor that in for Texas, too.
Especially for Texas, you have to be always aware that irony is never dead. And if you ever want to be sure of that, just look at Florida and Texas. They'll tell you stuff. In Texas's case, the University of Texas chancellor happens to be a guy named William McRaven, ex-Navy SEAL, helped plan the raid that killed Osama bin Laden. He's not like he's squishy on guns.
Right, okay.
But he told Evan Smith of the Texas Tribune before the law passed, I'm an educator now. My first priority is to the students and the faculty, the administrators, and the clinicians. He said, I understand the Second Amendment. I spent my life fighting for the Second Amendment. You have to ask yourself, why did the Founding Fathers put freedom of speech as the First Amendment?
Yes, good question.
They have done that because freedom of speech is incredibly important. If you have guns on campus, I question whether or not that will somehow inhibit our freedom of speech. Yeah. And so he was pressed to elaborate, and he said, well, if you're in a heated debate with somebody in the middle of a classroom, and you don't know whether or not that individual is carrying, how does that inhibit the interaction between students and faculty? Students and faculty raised that issue over and over again to Bruni when he interviewed them, and basically, the student body president said a big majority of campus was against this, and the lawmakers did this without the consent of the stakeholders. And Bruni says possibly that just encouraged the lawmakers. Universities are uniquely liberal institutions, and they're targets for conservatives, adding that a fellow named Neuberger said this. I have to figure out who Mr. Neuberger is. I don't know. But Mr. Neuberger says basically that the legislature just wanted to stick it to the college.
Yeah, why I really have very little idea, especially if I don't know, I'm not sure what they think they're going to get out of this.
Further, private colleges in Texas can opt out of campus carry, but public colleges can't.
Right, because private, better, more efficient. They're more efficient at having fewer killers at private colleges.
Right, so there's that story, and then there's the one that I'm just trouble having even reading. And this one is from the Daily News. I'll just read you the headline. Exclusive: Mom of Oregon mass killer stockpiled firearms out of fear of stricter gun laws and took son to shooting range. Does this sound familiar? Darn right it does. I'm from Newtown.
Yes. Well, there's an awful lot paralleling those two.
Scary in a very, very scary way. Except in this case, Mom lived, and so she gets to deal with the consequences.
Yeah, now we get to see what might have happened at that point in, I guess, in Newtown. I don't know whether she's going to have anything more to say.
No, other people in town did, though. I mean, this is it just shows that you need more guns reaction.
Yes.
We had a little bit of that in Newtown, although it was vastly outweighed by the maybe we need some more stricter gun laws. But it wasn't unanimous. It wasn't unanimous in Newtown. It wasn't unanimous in the parents in Newtown. And the fact is that, it's, again, I'm going to try to get a hold of it, at least for the wrap-up later. But I saw a fascinating discussion online about, trying to get liberals and progressives to understand that the reason that these gun laws don't pass isn't the NRA per se. It's, of course, the people in Congress, but the people in Congress are representing people out there, and people out there just have such an incredible paranoia about the government that they won't agree to having these laws passed. And that's really what it comes down to. And until you start persuading people out there who oppose you on background checks, almost nobody does. I mean, it's a 93%. But this is the dichotomy you always get in the polls. I'm against gun control, but I'm for background checks. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that? Well, background checks are okay, but it's the next step. It's you confiscating the guns, which you're eventually going to do because I don't trust you because you're the government.
Right. Yeah,
and
I mean,
that's real. Look, I mean, that whole I don't trust you because you're the government, those are the people that wind up fueling the Donald Trump candidacy.
In some respect, yeah.
In large respect. And so I got this great article that I found over the weekend, had up in the Pundit Roundup, and I'll just fetch it for you, by John Judas, which talks about, in National Journal, the return of the middle American radical. And basically traces the Trump supporter populism, as many, many others have, through Perot and Buchanan and Wallace and other people who are liberal on some things and conservative on others and not really able to be characterized in terms of where they're at, but represent a solid intellectual history, even though their individual policies are incoherent. When you look at each other or look at them in respect to each other, they're completely coherent because they keep coming over and over again to the same policies. You see them all the time.
Well, incoherence, it does run rampant, doesn't it?
The return of the middle American radicals, or Mars.
Oh, no, really?
Warren called these voters middle American. This is a fellow named Donald Warren, wrote about this in 1976. Mars are distinct in the depth of their feeling that the middle class has been seriously neglected. They saw government as favoring both rich and poor simultaneously, but not them.
Okay.
And like many on the left, Mars were deeply suspicious of big business, but and they backed liberal programs. They favored government guaranteeing jobs to everybody. They supported price controls, Medicare, some kind of national health insurance, federal aid to education, and Social Security. Very much sounds like Trump voters.
Yes.
On the other hand, they held very conservative positions on poverty and race. They were the least likely to agree that whites had any responsibility to make up for wrongs done to blacks in the past. This was back in the 70s. They were the most critical of welfare agencies. They rejected racial busing. They wanted to grant police a heavier hand to control crime. Law and Order, remember? LAWNORDER?
Right.
They were also the group most distrustful of the national government. And in a stand that wasn't really liberal or conservative, and that appeared, at least on the surface, to be in tension with their dislike of government, they were more likely than any other group to favor strong leadership in Washington, to advocate for a situation where one person is in charge. And if these voters are beginning to sound familiar, they should. Warren's Mars of the 70s are Donald Trump supporters of today. Interesting article.
Yes. I lament greatly the hanging of an acronym on them, but what can you do? That's what I don't know. Who wrote this?
John Judas.
Okay. All right. So book. All right. Get it. Another one. I guess so that's the soccer mom of this time. We had to have something.
Well, the whole thing is really looking at populism, which I have been fascinated by, as you know. Yes.
But that's taken. That's already named. Is out there. You got to have a new name for it, or else.
But the interesting thing, though, when Hofstadter wrote about populists in terms of the radical element in American politics. There's a lot of people that have criticized him since that time because he basically took a dim view of populists. And the thing is that people like William Jennings Bryan and Huey Long aren't necessarily the same as George Wallace and Pat Buchanan.
No.
And so lumping them all together as populists sometimes misses things. I mean, if your conclusion from all of that is all the populists are radicals and they have no chance and they're nutcases, then why would anybody be interested in Bernie Sanders? He doesn't fit into the Buchanan Wallace grab bag of populists either. Yeah. Neither does Elizabeth Warren. So they're really quite different from each other. Perot was probably closer to the left side of things, and Buchanan probably closer to the right side of things. But when you go back, listen to this, piece that he drags up about positions. Perot was closer to the left-wing tradition of populism. He denounced the General Motors executives he had battled and the revolving door lobbyists in Washington who represented foreign firms. Wallace and Buchanan leaned more to the right, but just as Perot wasn't really a liberal, they didn't fit easily as conservatives. Wallace fought integration, but he also complained that present tax laws were written to protect the Rockefellers, Fords, Carnegies, and Mellons. Buchanan defended Middle America against atrocities committed by an invasion from the South of illegal aliens, but he also, quote, foresaw a battle between the hired men of the money power who long ago abandoned as quaint but useless old ideas of nationhood and populist patriots and nationalists who want no part of Robert Rubin's world. So all of them, including Trump, throw in some, I'm for Social Security, and at least until he released his tax plan and showed it was all, smoke and mirrors, I want to charge the hedge fund guys a lot of money. So, there's a lot of different ways that you could look at this, and you could stick labels on them. The Macomb County Reagan Democrats, originally written by Stan Greenberg, still accepted Obama in the end when it was time to vote for him. So, it's really a fascinating group of people that turn out to be Trump voters because they're individual within themselves. Policies are so incoherent, you really can't totally predict what they're going to do.
Yes, that makes it.
They may like Bernie because he's from a rural state, and they may feel more comfortable with him, let's say, than a Hillary Clinton.
That could be.
And they may reject everybody on the money side because they look at Carly and say,
yeah, I mean, it's hard.
She's not a nice person.
Come out smelling good on the money side. Well, I don't know. This is. I guess it certainly bears repeating, and it's something we've talked about in the past that lumping people in under the banner of populist is no longer going to do the trick. There's just too much going on, and the positions are too far apart, and yet they get labeled populist as though we have. I guess that's a sign of how trapped we are in the two-party system. Well, I don't know what this other thing is. And independent doesn't help, so we'll just throw populist out there. They're popular because there they are. You can see people talking about them. We'll call them populists.
Rand Paul tried for it and completely and totally, utterly failed.
Yes, well.
But Trump is succeeding. He's picking up those people that would, perhaps be properly labeled as that. And however you want to think of them, they are a interesting group who feel passionately about whatever it is that they're doing, but still are a smaller group than the majority. That's the thing about populists. They tend to lose.
Oh. Well, don't tell them that.
I won't, but,
okay.
You can.
Oh, well, I've got an hour and 15 minutes to do it, so I might as well.
Yeah. Anyway, very good read, very detailed read. And, I just don't, it's worth thinking about in terms of when you see peak Trump and then you start to see the fall of Trump now that it's fall and where he's going to go and whether it's really going to come down to Cruz versus Rubio, as some people say, or whether it's going to be Jeb Bush, who's still third and fourth in Iowa and New Hampshire and still not out of it yet. He's got tons of money, lots of organization, and a whole lot of people who are willing to do dirty work for him, even though he's making his donors very, very nervous by poor poll numbers and terrible debate performances.
Stuff happens,
Well, yeah, exactly. He figures that in the end he'll be the one left standing, but stuff happens, and so we'll have to see.
Right, to see which stuff it is.
Anyway, with that, that's my summary for this morning. Hopefully it's been wide-ranging enough to get everybody annoyed with me. This is great work, and speaking with David Waldman, Kagro in the morning. And thanks so much for having me on. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll do it again.
Okay. Well done. Thanks very much, Greg. Plenty to go on here. Appreciate it, and we'll see you tomorrow. Okay. Let's see. Things that I have been watching go by or put away in pocket that we can turn to for the rest of the day. Let's see. How shall we peel off into all of this? First of all, I guess I now have some additional information to add to one of the weekend shooting events that took place. I had an interesting error made in my own gun fail reporting yesterday. Although I guess it would be hard to call it my own gun fail reporting. It's always hard to call it my own gun fail reporting anyway, because I'm just telling you what I find other actual journalists reporting. But you know what I'm doing with the gun fail. Obviously, I don't have to explain that at any point. And others join with me in that effort and send me articles of interest all the time. Not always classic gun fail, but certainly closely enough related that they think it will be of interest. And I got one yesterday describing the fatal shooting of an 8-year-old girl in Tennessee by her 11-year-old neighbor. And, it wasn't labeled as such. Often people will just appropriate, and you're welcome to do it. By no means do you need my permission to appropriate the label gun fail, the hashtag gun fail. It was labeled, I think, as such. Maybe not. Perhaps not. Anyway, I retweeted it when I saw it and then grabbed the headline and sent that one out and noted that, it looks like this will be our 65th or so child under 15 years of age accidentally shot to death this year. When it struck me, as I began to see a few people say, I read the article and you know what, it doesn't say it's an accident. And I wasn't sure at first whether they meant, was this the reaction of, well, it's really negligence, there's no such thing as an accidental shooting, which we get all the time. But no, turned around, went back, take a look at the article, and you're right, it doesn't make any mention of it. And in fact, what it does mention is that the 11-year-old boy, the neighbor who shot this 8-year-old girl, Michaela Dyer, by the way, her name. And it turns out that they were charging the 11-year-old with first-degree murder. And wow, that sort of throws a little bit of a monkey wrench in things. Silly me, I jumped out too quickly and assumed that when an 8-year-old girl was shot down and killed by a shotgun wielded by an 11-year-old neighbor, that there must have been some sort of accident involved. But nope. Looks like an intentional gun murder, not, something you're used to seeing. So my bad on that one. Turns out it was that Michaela wasn't the 65th child under 15 years of age accidentally shot to death this year. She's just one of the hundreds of kids intentionally shot to death this year. It just so happens that, and it was an 11-year-old on the other end of the gun. What could possibly be motivating this? According to Twitter, pointing to a piece in the Daily Beast by Kate Bricolet, I don't know how, Bricklayer? Maybe not. Bricolet, you tell me. Briqueuelet. Everyone's got to torture me with their name. Anyway, you will see it. You'll no doubt have clicked on it now that I've retweeted it as well. Kid-on-kid gun violence claims a tiny life. Tennessee cops say an 11-year-old shot and killed his 8-year-old neighbor with his dad's gun. And guess why? Cops say an 8-year-old girl in Tennessee was fatally shot by her 11-year-old neighbor who allegedly fired at her because she refused to show him her puppy. Now the boy, accused of bullying her in the past, is facing first-degree murder charges. The 5th-grade suspect, quote, intentionally, unquote, shot the victim as she played in front of her White Pine, Tennessee, mobile home Saturday evening, Jefferson County Sheriff Bud McCoig said yesterday. The boy has been charged in juvenile court. He says, police called to the scene around 7:30 p.m., found the girl, identified by family as Michaela Dyer, lying outside with a gunshot wound to the chest. She was taken to a local hospital where she was pronounced dead. McCoy declined to release the 11-year-old's name or a possible motive for the killing at a news conference on Sunday, but the victim's mother, Tasha Dyer, accused the boy on social media of bullying Michaela around and shooting the girl on purpose. He was bullying her around, and the parents didn't do anything about it, Dyer wrote in a Facebook comment early Sunday. I need my baby back home. I love her so much. Not going to happen, unfortunately. The heartbroken mom later told ABC 6 in Knoxville that Michaela was playing outside her trailer when the boy asked to see her puppy. The girl told him no, and he allegedly shot her from inside his mobile home shortly afterwards. The rest, I don't know whether there's any more details, clinical details that is worth uncovering, but then the details here are emotional ones, important part of the tapestry. She was mommy's girl, Dyer told a TV reporter through tears. No matter how bad of a mood you were in, she could always make you smile. Dyer said she had previously contacted the school principal because the boy was making fun of Michaela, calling her names. He quit for a while after that, Dyer said, but the alleged bullying took a tragic, fatal turn. Cops say the boy shot Michaela from inside his house using his father's 12-gauge shotgun. Police also recovered a BB gun at the scene, Sheriff McCoy said. A day after the shooting, a piece of cardboard covered the broken window of the boy's rusty family home. 5 other kids were at the boy's home at the time of the shooting, McCoy told reporters. The state's Department of Children's Services is also investigating, but it's unclear if any other children have been removed from the residence, the Knoxville News-Sentinel reported. The young suspect had a detention hearing scheduled for Monday morning. A judge could later decide whether the case should be transferred to adult court. That's going to be a tough call. On Sunday, friends and relatives posted tributes to the little girl on Facebook, and as we've so often seen cases like this, created a GoFundMe page for memorial services. With our family, we try our best, but when it rains, it pours on us, one grieving family member wrote on Facebook. A hug by this sweet girl was equal or greater than winning the lottery. Common reaction to all this stuff. I don't know how else you could possibly react to it. The GoFundMe thing, it just compounds the tragedy. This tends to happen, very frequently. The trailer park is not an uncommon place for this sort of thing to happen. You're disadvantaged socially and economically, and the guns are cheap. They're still around, and not a lot of time for parental supervision, and sometimes this happens everywhere, to be sure. By the way, though, I'm sure there will be no calls for condemnation of what might presumably be white-on-white crime. The victim here, Michaela Dyer, is pictured, and so we can tell about her. Can't tell about the shooter, and don't want to jump to any conclusions about it, but that's what we're not hearing. Whereas, meanwhile, out in Oregon, we're hearing all sorts of things, including in discussions about the mom and her stockpiling of guns, the claims that in the midst of all of this, that she should have been aware of her son's fascination with, and it depends on who you ask. If you ask the newspapers, they say the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, which sounds weird. But remember, he apparently he's got some connection to the trollish world of 4chan. I don't know how dedicated to the IRA he might really be. It seems to me as likely to be a sort of weird underground humor, ironic look for lulls and laughs in 4chan world to pick a terrorist organization that isn't Muslim to attach yourself to and just to confuse people and confound them and see how they react to it. But that doesn't... here's your answer, 4chan. The right wing doesn't actually care what you leave behind and say about yourself. Or maybe they're just too smart to know, or they're too smart so they know you're trying to lure them into something with your trolling. They just went right past what you had to say and said you were an ISIS supporter and a Muslim. Never mind that you're not Arab, Never mind that you're not Muslim. Never mind that you are apparently aggressively atheist. They just went ahead and labeled you an ISIS sympathizer, and they're going to run with that. And it doesn't matter what you show them. Interesting, though. It looks like the shooter in the Oregon case is a mixed race kid. His mom appears from Facebook to be black. I have not seen Dad, but I assume that if the reports of his being of mixed racial background are correct, that he's not. So it has to come from somewhere. It doesn't appear to have anything to do with his motivation or anything like that. Who knows what that is. But it is interesting. What we have seen in the news is interviews with the dad, who seems surprised that his son had so many weapons and so many weapons available to him. All the weapons in question here appear to have been purchased legally, though not all in his name necessarily. And I guess it's a mix and match situation as to which ones belong to Mom and which ones belong to the shooter. But I do think it was interesting that it was found over the weekend, for instance, that she had been online. The Daily News in New York had the first write-up I saw about this one. Mom of Oregon shooter bragged about weapons online, according to reports. Dennis Slattery is the writer here. The mother of the rage-filled loner who shot and killed 9 people at an Oregon community college blasted opponents of open carry laws and bragged about her personal arsenal of weapons online, according to reports. It's a bit of a mixed bag, because on the one hand, I mean, she clearly is bragging about the number of weapons she has and the types, and very typical of gun enthusiasts in being open, proud, and very descriptive of the weapons that they have. But at the same time, there were also reference to a comment in which she says, open carry isn't the solution for everything. By the way, there are certain situations in which open carry would just not work out. And Justice tells me that Raw Story has a similar approach. I could probably handle it, at least in reader mode, without destroying things too badly. I'll take a look at that one. Laurel Harper, though, is the name of the mom. And I guess, I don't know. We don't have an official policy for Kagro in the Morning about whether or not we name the shooter or not. I understand the sentiment. That was an interesting argument over the weekend, too. Name the shooter or don't. Definitely understand the sentiment of not giving him any additional fame or recognition, but also saw some interesting pushback on the notion that here law enforcement was asking for anyone with information about this kid to speak up, except it would be extraordinarily difficult to speak up if you didn't know the name of the person about whom you were supposed to speak up. So there is that. On the other hand, it was also interesting watching the sheriff, a Sandy Hook truther, insisting rather, grandiosely that he was not going to name the shooter and not going to give him the notoriety he was looking for. He was very smug and self-satisfied, I think. I mean, other people would view it differently. I am colored in my perception here by the fact that he's posted the Sandy Hook truther video and has since deleted it, by the way. I don't know whether that means he is just covering his tracks or is sincerely repentant about it. We will find out about whether he's sincerely repentant about having posted this thing. I do not. I think it is well within the realm of possibility that he will be facing in person survivor families from Newtown very shortly. I mean, it has become unfortunate habit. It's unfortunately had to become habitual, I guess. It's quite a fortunate habit that they do it, but the families of Newtown and other families, survivors, etc., of mass shootings now make it a practice in many cases to go and visit with the families and communities affected by mass shootings afterwards, and offering all sorts of whatever you can offer by way of advice in terms of how to move on and how to recover, or how to become activists yourself and push for gun safety legislation, whatever it is that they discuss. And it's all of those things and more. But they do very frequently show up in these locations, and there's a real chance that you're going to see survivors and families of Newtown victims in Roseburg, Oregon, at press conferences, probably even attended by or where the sheriff is in near proximity. And, they'll take the microphone and say, we need to hear from the sheriff, by the way, about his denialism. And there's so many layers operating in it. One, whether that means that he really still believes that. Did he ever believe it? Does he feel sorry for the pain now that if he professes to be capable of seeing the pain of the families of the victims in his own jurisdiction, does he now see, because that shooting, it is likewise being questioned by conspiracy theorists on the internet. I mean, that doesn't take long. Within 20 minutes, you had Sandy Hook truthers starting their own Umpqua Community College shooting doubters group. And, it's pretty vile. Certainly you've seen it with Sandy Hook. It's every bit as vile. It's the same thing. Very interesting from a clinical perspective, I guess, to look at the particular pathology here and how they work. Everything from comparing photos of the witnesses from the two scenes and insisting that they're the same people, that there are, as they call them, crisis actors hired by the administration to undermine gun rights, et cetera, et cetera. And I will admit, they put together some things, if you're the kind of person who falls for that sort of theory, they put together things that certainly make it look like the same people might, in fact, be at the two or more shooting scenes. The difficulty with it from the perspective of a person who's used to being somewhat more critical of those kinds of theories is, well, what you've shown me is two pictures of someone that appears to be the same or very similar person, but I don't know where the pictures came from, and all you're doing is telling me that picture one is an unnamed supposed witness to the Sandy Hook shooting, and picture two is an unnamed supposed witness to the UCC shooting, and isn't that coincidental, and don't you think that's amazing, and it must obviously be evidence that they are crisis actors and that the whole thing, both of them are hoaxes, as opposed to looking at them and saying, I don't know who this person is, you don't know who this person is, I don't know where you got the pictures, you say they came from two different locations, I don't know that, I have no idea. All you're doing is showing me two photos that you've admittedly, I guess if we have to cross-examine you, two manipulated photographs. I don't know whether you photoshopped them. I don't know whether you got them from somebody else. I don't know whether they were taken at the scene. I don't know what the chain of custody for these photos is. If they were admitted as evidence and in court, and that their chain of custody and the fact that they were, if it had been established somehow factually that they'd been taken in the two different locations, then you'd have something. But we don't have that. All we have is you took pictures of a person that you either two people who look very similar, or for all I know, the exact same person, and put two different labels on them and said that's proof. So that doesn't really work. So I can't help you. Don't know why that works with people. Anyway, so you've definitely got that going on, and it's rather disturbing, and I would be very interested to see how the sheriff would respond to that. But at the same time, even discounting the conspiracy theory angle of it, there's much more of interest to dig into in this particular shooting. I think where we left off was the mom bragging online about her guns, and I found it interesting, one, that she was doing that. Well, she wasn't doing it after the shooting. I don't think anybody should make that mistake. But it is always interesting to see people bragging about the guns and the access to guns, or what they would do with the guns, or how they're going to be awesome with the guns and nobody's going to do anything bad with my guns because I'm well trained, et cetera, and then find that paper trail or virtual trail afterwards once something terrible has happened. And it's not that hard to find usually. And I guess that's how they came up with this here at the Daily News. I don't know who first discovered this, but Once we found out that the shooter was going by the name of Chris Harper Mercer, I guess it was not hard to find Laurel Harper, his mom. And Facebook makes that pretty easy. If you can come up with a Facebook page for Chris Harper Mercer, and I don't know whether they ever did, very, very often, usually the case, that he'll be connected as a friend to anybody who he's related to who likewise has a Facebook page. That's one of the first friendships on Facebook usually established, people looking to boost their friend numbers. So he friended his mom, I guess. That's probably how they found her. And she goes on at some length in her descriptions of her guns. Like most gun enthusiasts, saying things like, "And when the mood strikes, as long as we're tossing around brand names," thank you for opening that door, I think I'll do it, "I sling an AR," which is not a brand name, Tech 9, which is, or AK, which isn't, over my shoulder, or holster a Glock 21, not 22, or one of my other handguns, like the Sig Sauer P226, and walk out the door, Harper bragged. "I find the shotguns are a little too cumbersome to open carry." That Facebook post was in response to comments about open carry laws. Harper and her son Mercer moved to Winchester, Oregon from Torrance, California around 2013, neighbors and officials said. Former neighbors who knew the pair in California, said that Mercer kept to himself, but if he did talk, it would be as if he was having a temper tantrum. Don't know how accurate that is, but that's what they're saying. Many described Harper, though, as the opposite, outgoing, chatty, and looking to make a new start in Oregon. That would, of course, be the people who knew him there versus the people who knew him in California. Harper hid her love for weaponry behind a sunny exterior and even argued that open carry laws would not work everywhere, which is necessary. Interesting that she would say it. She says, "You can't be that naive, can you? It's ridiculously easy to understand the apprehension associated with open carry. I moved from Southern California to Oregon, from Southern crime-omania, as she calls it, to open carry. An open carry law won't work everywhere," Harper wrote. Officials said her son was heavily armed when he arrived on the campus on Thursday morning, carrying a half a dozen weapons with him. I guess they later raided the house, pulled out another 6 or 7. And then, of course, some mention of the fact alleged that the killer appears to have asked their victims about their religion before shooting them. But again, I don't know how 4chan-y that might really be versus that being a sincerely held grudge. Speaking of 4chan, and I guess I'm not alone finally in discussing some of this, I see that this morning the Washington Post reports that Philadelphia colleges are on alert in a related way. I can't believe that this is making it into the headlines at this point. Now I know we were barking up the right tree here, I guess. Philadelphia colleges on alert after 4chan posts threats of violence on Monday. How about that? Justin William Moyer, writing here for the Washington Post. Less than a week after a mass shooter at a community college in Umpqua, Oregon. Is it in Umpqua, Oregon? It's in Roseburg. I know that. I don't know. Is that the county as well? I would guess so. Anyway, we know which one we're talking about. But less than a week after that, and the 9 people killed there. And that's another interesting thing I've seen, by the way, in the reporting, too. They, in addition to the question over whether or not to name the shooter, it's listing the casualties as 9 dead. 10 are dead. The shooter is dead, too, killed by police. But I guess the new convention is to write that out for whatever reason. Or, in fact, I think the coroner's report said he wasn't shot by police, that he shot himself, as often these mass shooters do. Also very interesting, too, because apparently he left behind some writing expressing interest in perpetrating a mass shooting like those done in the past. But again, I'm not sure whether that's sincerely held belief or whether that's 4chan-ish trolling to leave behind to confuse and confound people, but it hardly matters. Sort of evident of sickness either way, just a different type, perhaps. But apparently, in part of the writing, he had expressed a frustration with prior mass shooters having killed themselves when the police arrived, and that he had apparently vowed in some way to shoot it out with police and not to kill himself at the end of his mass shooting. And then he did, so I guess he just dies disappointed with himself. Hey, too bad. I don't know, very weird. I don't know what to make of that at all. I just thought that was interesting and wanted to throw that out there. Anyway, the Washington Post reports the same thing now, threatened in Philadelphia. The warning came in an email from the FBI to some schools, including Temple University and Drexel University. FBI now watching 4chan, which is both encouraging in a way because look where this just came from, and discouraging in a way because look at the FBI monitoring, domestic computer electronic communications again. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, is there any real... this raises some serious theoretical questions. I mean, honestly, from a personal standpoint, can you really say that, it's super important that we protect the privacy of the communications of 4chaners? Not really, but then again, they're just, at bottom, they're still people and citizens of the United States, presumably, but you don't have any expectation of privacy in planning a criminal enterprise, so I think it pretty easily defeats most of the legal objections. It's just a weird thing here. And it'll be a difficult part of the puzzle to sort out if we now have to worry about the privacy of 4chan, especially if they are busy plotting school shootings, and especially if they're 4channing it up, as we expect they are, and you're unable to discern with any accuracy whether they're just trolling the FBI or not. But, as they say in these matters, out of an abundance of caution, the FBI Philadelphia field office notified local colleges and universities of a social media posting which threatened violence at a Philadelphia area college or university for today, Monday, October 5th. The email read, no specific college or university was identified in the posting, nor was it in the 4chan postings about the UCC shooting, or what turned out to be about the UCC shooting. We encourage students, faculty, and employees at area colleges and universities to follow the guidance of their campus security officials. The FBI will continue to work with our federal, state, and local law enforcement partners to investigate threats of violence, and as always, we ask the public to report suspicious activity to law enforcement. Some reports link the threat to this post, and it's linked here, on the anonymous message board 4chan, a site that's come under fire for content many deem offensive. And it is, and they try to be offensive. That's their act. That's what they do online. I mean, it's not an act. They're actually being offensive, but they enjoy doing that. And I assume the better part of them don't mean for it to rise to the level where people get hurt. But I think that there's a sort of, another sick segment of them for whom the whole point of it is that people get hurt by it, and another that I think for whom the thrill comes from not really being able to tell. There's some weird individuals out there. The first of our kind has struck fear into the hearts of America, the Post read, referencing the Beta Rebellion. Remember when we referenced this at the end of last week? His cries have been heard even by the president. It continued. On October 5th, 2015, at 1 p.m. CT, Central Time, a fellow robot will take up arms against a university near Philadelphia. Why would you post that in Central Time? I don't have any idea, but that seems like an important mistake and or clue. His cries will be heard, his victims will cower in fear, and the strength of the Union will decay a little more. And you don't know just how trolly this is. A law enforcement source who asked not to be identified because the source is involved in the investigation confirmed the threat was linked to the Beta Rebellion 4chan post. In the Philadelphia area, home to dozens of institutions of higher education, many planned to stay open, but many were taking precautions. Was anyone thinking of closing? I am sure many of you have safety concerns, and I wanted to let you know that we hear you, Charles J. Leone, The executive director of campus safety services at Temple University wrote in a statement, I also want to emphasize that we have received no information that there is a specific threat here at Temple. At the same time, we have already taken actions to increase the security presence throughout the university tonight and tomorrow. Drexel's statement referenced the shooting at Encore. Since the shooting last week at a community college in Oregon, the FBI has seen similar social media postings throughout the country. The university wrote in a statement, although the FBI has assured us there is no specific threat to a particular college or university, we are taking this very seriously and taking extra precautions to protect the Drexel community. It is interesting, though, that they reference this thing in Central Time. I guess whoever wrote the piece should be looked for in the Central Time Zone, or at least initially anyway. Philadelphia, of course, in the Eastern Time Zone. Just because all the recent things have been going on, it's scary to think it's possibly going to happen on our campus. Mackenzie Leedy, a student at Drexel, told WPVI, so I'm scared to actually leave my dorm tomorrow, which, of course, will thrill 4chan no end. At the University of Pennsylvania, which also advised of the threat, students called for classes to be canceled. I can't understand why we still have class tomorrow, one student tweeted. You have to. Canceling class is such a small consequence when you consider the huge risk. Are you kidding? You really want to hand over to 4chan the ability to cancel classes at a college, at an Ivy League institution, no less? Well, that's probably unwise, but we only say that because it's still not 1 p.m. Central Time just yet, and I guess we have to see how credible a threat those things turn out to be. That's pretty scary, and I think the 4chan aspect of it just makes it scarier still. Was there more about this one? I had, in reading these things, I guess I thought there was some more that I thought we ought to add to the picture here. I don't know, though. I will add this, though, to the larger picture. I thought this was an interesting piece in The Hill from last week. Sheriffs, not particularly the sheriff out there in Roseburg, but lots of sheriffs all over the country. Sheriffs demand more military weapons to thwart mass shootings. We've been through the whole militarized police thing quite extensively in the past. Interesting that they're using this latest incident in Oregon to ask for yet more military weaponry. How it would thwart a mass shooting, I have no idea, but I assume that they don't really have any particular connection to make there either, except to say, to depend on people's natural confusion. Well, these mass shooters, they tend to have assault weapons, so we'll need to have assault weapons in order to fight back against them, and we'll need, tactical equipment like ballistic vests and armored personnel carriers to bring our SWAT team up close, and then they can take them out strategically and without risking officer lives. And while that's all true, most sheriffs already have all that they need in that sense, so I can't imagine why they would need more necessarily, and I don't think that any of their SWAT teams lack for AR-15s. What more military weaponry do they want? I don't know, but I'm not particularly interested. I will say this, I certainly don't support giving out any more military weapons to sheriffs who deny that these mass shootings take place anyway, because they would have even less real reason and valid reason to be armed thus. They are just looking for toys to play with, and they seem like particularly dangerous people to give those toys to in the first place. But here's the straight-up story. Tim Devaney, writing for The Hill, in the wake of a mass shooting at a community college in Oregon, law enforcement officials are complaining about new restrictions on police use of military-style weapons that they say could help them respond to mass shootings. I will tell you this, if you shoot a mass shooter in the head with a Glock 45, he's just as dead as he would be if you shoot him in the head with an AR-15. And that doesn't matter anyway, because you've got the AR-15s and no one's taking them away from you. A tank might not actually help in this situation, but who cares? Because you've already got one of those too. What do you want out of the military that is really going to help you in these situations? And don't just say more weapons, because obviously dangerous person. You're armed, he's armed. You've got bulletproof vests. You've got a SWAT team. You guys train for this stuff all the time. You've got the advantage. Other than arming you with nuclear weapons, I don't know what else you think you need. Well, let's see if the article makes any claim in that respect. One need only look at recent incidents, including the tragedy in Oregon, to see how this equipment is needed by our agencies and officers, said Jonathan Thompson, Executive Director of the National Sheriff's Association. It is disgraceful, he says, for political operatives with no law enforcement experience to issue guidance on law enforcement tactics without taking into account the true ramifications of their actions, he added. Okay, tell me the actual situation here. I would bet you dollars to donuts that Jonathan Thompson doesn't represent the whole lot of member sheriffs who haven't gotten military equipment from the federal government already and still have it. There's a lot of grandstanding. It's disgraceful. Political operatives, no experience. How dare you? Well, what do you want? What are you looking for that you don't already have? And I don't know. Does Tim Devaney ask that question at any point? Well, we'll find out. Read on. The Obama administration has taken steps to limit the Defense Department's ability to give old military-style equipment to state and local police departments, though I don't think that they've taken anything back that they've given in the past. The White House's Law Enforcement Equipment Working Group recommended banning police departments from acquiring grenade launchers. Try and make the case that a grenade launcher would have been at home on the UCC campus. Certain armored vehicles, not all armored vehicles, they have plenty of them. Armed aircraft, you were going to use that. Bayonets, really? And high-caliber guns and ammunition through this program, which you already have. The administration formed the group in the wake of the public outcry over scenes of heavily armed police officers responding to riots related to the shooting of an unarmed black man, and in fact of many unarmed black men around the country. It determined that putting this military-style equipment in the hands of police officers is likely to put the public at risk. But the sheriffs say the hastily written requirements will limit their ability to respond to mass shootings. The most recent mass shooting occurred Thursday. We know all about it. The sheriffs say they needed military-style equipment to respond to shootings like this. Yes, they do, and they've got it, so what's the problem? The sheriffs say they need military-style equipment to respond to shootings like this. Okay, AR-15s, right? Yes. Do you have them? Yeah, saw the pictures of them. And in fact, the article is illustrated with a picture of evacuees from UCC campus being searched by police, one of whom has got an AR-15 quite visibly slung over his back, and plenty of sidearms to go around for the cops who don't have those. No one I see in there, I mean, I don't see anybody who's thinking, what I need here is aircraft and a bayonet and a grenade launcher. No follow-up questions. This is disappointing. Not surprising, but disappointing. Let's see. We call on President Obama and his appointees to rescind this deplorable requirement immediately. Listen to the language they're using here. And work with elected sheriffs to develop a plan that protects people and manages our equipment effectively, Thompson said. I'm on the borderline of just lumping Thompson here with Hanlon as gun nut and truther and just generally a hater. I mean, I guess I would like to hear from the what's the name of the sheriff's department here? I can't even remember which. Is it Douglas County? It isn't Umpqua County, isn't it? Now that I think about it, I think it's Douglas County, Oregon, where Roseburg is. I don't know what Umpqua is exactly. I guess is it the name of a region up there? The natives up there will have to tell me exactly what that describes. But there's been no call that I have seen from the sheriff's department saying that they were afraid to go in and control the situation in any way, shape, or form for lack of bayonets, grenade launchers, and aircraft. So I'll express some disappointment here in roll call for enabling this thing. I mean, I know they feel like they had to print the press release, but I mean, from what in what way is it helpful to anybody for the sheriff's group to come out and be like, oh my God, the Obama administration, deplorable and disgraceful, and how dare you, and you're not thinking about the ramifications of your actions, et cetera, et cetera. Such strident language. And by the way, the executive director of the National Sheriff's Association could possibly have taken the time to say, I don't want to give the wrong impression here. We don't want to blame President Obama for this crazed mass shooter's actions. We blame him and only him. But, I don't know. I guess the National Sheriff's Association membership just loves bashing Obama, and he knows his constituency, perhaps. Or else they are just, this could also be the case. Lots of sheriff's offices could subscribe to and probably pay dues to the National Sheriff's Association out of this sort of inertia. Once we began subscribing to it because we are a sheriff's office and they are a National Sheriff's Association, and we just never really paid that much attention to things. We don't really care what they lobby for, et cetera, et cetera. Every once in a while we remember maybe to vote for leadership there, but not really. It's just sort of one of those things we subscribe to, and the dues are paid out of official funds, and it's not out of pocket for anybody, so we don't really care. They should start waking up and paying attention to what they're subscribing to. I think that's pretty important. It is rather upsetting, to say the least. All right. Segueing from this to other things, let's see if there are other interesting pieces that will provide connective tissue, or whether we ought to simply jump out into a totally different topic. Let's do that instead. As a matter of fact, I was earlier reminded that we need to take a quick look at the leadership elections in the Republican conference, reminding everybody that the voting is taking place, scheduled for Thursday of this week. That voting would be the internal voting inside of the House Republican caucus to settle the question of who will be nominated as the Republicans' candidate for Speaker on the floor to replace Speaker Boehner when that day comes. Now, I guess he will be resigning effective at the end of October. Is that right? And so the House floor vote, in which the actual next speaker will be officially selected, won't happen until that point when the office becomes vacant. But presumably, absent a total and complete breakdown of the House Republican Conference, the issue of who that's going to be should be settled on Thursday. So let's take a look at the roll call piece here that I tucked away, written by Emma Dumaine, under the headline, GOP split over whether to fast-track elections or take more time. I noticed this being tweeted out this morning, that there were some people, it said, in probably the House conference, calling for taking a take-it-slow approach to the House leadership elections. Those would be, I'll guess for you, and I'm probably right on this score, and hopefully this article will confirm that, those would be the people calling for things to slow down would be the ones who have not spent years and years carefully laying the groundwork that it normally requires to be elected to these positions. That is, they have not been touring the country, campaigning for and raising money for colleagues and passing that money out and helping new Republicans get elected and helping old Republicans stay elected to Congress, and doing the hard work of showing in concrete terms as many Republican members as possible and prospective members as possible that they will have their back if they are rewarded with leadership positions in the future, or retaining or are able to retain the leadership positions they currently have. That's the currency, pun intended, of leadership elections. Who wants to slow the process down? People who just got into the game the other day and who think, well, I'm a very conservative guy, and I punch all the targets that conservatives want punched. So I should win because I believe, for whatever reason, that these elections are actually driven ideologically and not by more pragmatic and practical terms, money, which often follows ideology, to be sure. I mean, very rarely do members in pursuit of leadership positions garner enough funding in their leadership PACs to be able to actually fund to the maximum level allowable, $5,000 per campaign cycle, every single one of the other members of the House Republican caucus. And so they do things strategically, and they usually try to back members who they know will be friendly to them ideologically speaking, just in terms of maximizing the impact of their money. Let's give $5,000 to the members who, if they are elected or stay reelected, will be here and be part of our reliably ultra-conservative coalition. Now, there are a few people who are more enterprising who branch out and say, I'd like to either spread my money out a little more evenly, or I'll just raise more and give more, or perhaps I'll target my giving to people who I don't have an ideological affinity for necessarily, but who could be coaxed over to my side with a little bit of cash. If I say to you, all right, we don't always see eye to eye on ideology, but I'm backing you because that's what Republicans do for one another, remember that come election time. That happens more often toward the very top of the election ladders for two reasons. One, because they have to build a bigger and stronger and more permanent coalition. If you want to move up the ladder, you got to have friends in all parts of the conference. And if you can't get them ideologically, you can buy them with cold, hard cash, and that's okay. And, they don't have to vote for you, but usually people do feel at least more favorably inclined to people who have helped them get elected, which is a different way of looking at it than he gave me money in exchange for my vote. But it comes down to much the same thing. But you got to build a broader coalition the higher up you want to move in the ladder. And also, because you are a more prominent personage in the leadership ladder already, usually when this happens, it's easier for you to raise more money for your leadership PAC. If you are a, regional deputy whip, there's not that much cachet in giving you that much cash, so to speak. But if you are majority leader or running for majority leader or running for speaker or what have you, and you've got a realistic shot at becoming that powerful person, lots of money flows to you. And so therefore lots of money can flow out of you as well, and you can be even more strategic in your giving, and you can afford to give to people who aren't necessarily your ideological twins, but whose vote you could use nonetheless. Anyway, it's no doubt the people who have done none of this hard work, and it is hard work, who will want to see the election cycle for the conference, at least within the conference, be extended. I need to find out whether anybody supports me or contact people and ask them to support me. I will probably find out shortly after I contact them that it takes cash to make this whole thing work, and I don't have any time to raise that, but I can also at least make a stab at making an ideological appeal to people. Yes, Kevin McCarthy gave you $3,000 for your election fund, but think about it. You and I see eye to eye when it comes to policy, that is to say, we don't want to make any, and we see eye to eye when it comes to ideology. That means, for instance, I bash Planned Parenthood, you bash Planned Parenthood. Kevin McCarthy does bash Planned Parenthood, but not as hard as you and I do. And wouldn't it be better if we had a speaker who was really strident on these things and put those members in the position of deciding whether to vote for the person that they would rather have bashing Planned Parenthood, or to vote for the person who doesn't bash Planned Parenthood as hard as I do, but gave me thousands of dollars, perhaps lots of money, over many, many years to run for Congress and stay here as an incumbent. Where should my loyalty be? Well, the longer, I guess they figure, these other guys do, the longer they have to try and put that pressure on people, the more votes they'll be able to get. Stands to reason, I suppose, but I don't know whether it's going to make any real difference. Cash really is king, or at least it has been traditionally on both sides of the aisle, and it will be very interesting to see whether ideology is able to overcome cash ever, and whether that'll happen first on the Republican side of the aisle, which would also be interesting. It's not that we haven't had that contest, by the way. I do keep referring to this, and I know this is old ground for most of you who are listening to the show, but I never really made the reference all the way back to the majority leader contest that we had some years ago when Nancy Pelosi rose to the speakership thanks to Democrats having captured the House the last time around, but the speaker, of course, Pelosi had been serving as Democratic leader at that point, but as minority leader in the House. When the Democrats gained the majority, she moved up to speaker, and the majority leader position became available. Steny Hoyer, who did win that contest, was looking to move up from the whip position to the majority leader position, and was challenged by no newcomer to it, but a newcomer to the leadership race situation, John Murtha. Remember this race? And there was some question among rank-and-file Democrats outside of Congress, not the rank-and-file Democrats inside the Democratic caucus, but there was some question for the rest of us, inside the caucus too, what should we do here? Because there was, for the first time, an ideological question presented in the House leadership contest. And so they were, for the first time, confronted with the question of, do we go with Steny Hoyer, who gave us all considerably more money over the years and over a much longer amount of time, because he's been at this leadership game since forever, or do we go with Murtha, who is making a bid for the leadership on the strength of his opposition as a well-known, decorated American veteran, whose credentials as a veteran are sterling and unassailable, but yet opposed the Iraq War. Should we not at this point elevate to majority leader someone who was right on the war where Hoyer was not? Or should we go with the support that Hoyer has given us? I mean, Hoyer has come around a bit on the war, certainly, in reflection of Democratic sentiment in general, but, do you want to reward the person who was right closer to the outset? Or now I'm thinking back on Murtha's record. Was it that he was opposed at the outset, or was it just that he was one of the first to come around to the realization that it was a mistake? So I may have that wrong, but it doesn't matter that much, because even as that contest was happening and rank-and-file Democrats were interested in it because it was a contest of positions on the war, I wanted to remind everybody at the time, and I did, the thing that's a much better predictor of the outcome is look at the money. And Hoyer blows Murtha out of the water on this. Murtha has made an admirable attempt in the last couple of years. He knew that this was coming, and he was ramping up, trying to get his foot in the door, and he did raise and give out an awful lot of money from his own leadership pack, but he was a very, very late comer to that game, and Hoyer had it all over him on the volume, depth, and length, and breadth of his spending, and eventually pulled that contest out. And rank-and-file Democrats outside of Congress were left scratching their heads, saying, how could it be that we would pass up the opportunity to make a vocal early critic of the Iraq War, who is a veteran and unassailably so, our majority leader? And the answer was money. You are granted the franchise in this leadership election by virtue of having been elected to Congress. That's the most basic currency there is, and there is no more basic currency in determining the value of that currency than the cash it takes to be elected and stay elected. And guess what? That's what happened. And that was the end of the Murtha rise up the leadership ladder, and then he was dead not that long after, but that has nothing to do with it. Anyway, they're facing the same question, and it is interesting to see that it's possible that they might go that direction. I guess you probably all thought, you rank-and-file Democrats listening to the show, probably thought that your progressive champs would be the first ones to say, let's put the money aside and think ideologically. You wouldn't have thought that the Republicans would beat you to that particular punch. But they very well may. Not that that's terribly surprising now that I think about it. Step back a little bit. Is it really that surprising that they would put ideology over money? Well, that would be surprising, except that their ideology, generally speaking, is money. And so maybe it's not that great of an achievement. Yes, it still presents the ticklish situation for them of who to support. When the money is, this money personally makes it into my campaign funds versus money in general, or cutting taxes on people who are part of the donor class who likewise will contribute to my campaign, etc. It's difficult to separate for Republicans, at least in my mind, the connections between money and ideology. So maybe it stands to reason that they would do it first, and to do it in a way that doesn't feel particularly satisfactory to progressives. Anyway, this is what we're learning from the roll call piece. I guess we'll see whether this stuff is confirmed for us. House Republicans were already divided over the candidates for Speaker, Majority Leader, and Whip, and now they're finding themselves split over when to hold these elections. Over the weekend, the expectation that members would vote on Thursday for new leadership positions and new leadership slates was turned upside down, as some lawmakers amped up lobbying efforts to postpone votes for Majority Leader and Whip. I guess they're not bothering with postponing the speakership race. That seems to be pretty well settled, and that's interesting too. But the real action then is on the undercard. Members were also whispering about the ramifications of letting almost a month go by between nominating a new speaker candidate and holding the decisive roll call vote on the House floor. Interesting dynamic as well. On Sunday, Representatives Mick Mulvaney of South Carolina and James B. Renacci of Ohio were collecting signatures for a letter to the GOP conference chairwoman, Cathy McMorris Rodgers, asking for two things: another special members meeting to discuss changing some of the conference rules, and a delay in leadership elections scheduled for October 8th, except for the nominating vote for resigning Speaker John Boehner's successor. The only election that's relevant to October 8th would be the only election that is relevant on October 8th would only be an election for the conference nominee for the office of Speaker, since that is the only vacancy that exists. Mulvaney and Renacci wrote. They actually stopped and wrote that sentence down. That's pretty bad. A Renacci spokeswoman told CQ Roll Call that, as of late afternoon Sunday, the two lawmakers had received commitments from at least 19 co-signers. That's not very many. And the letter would be sent to McMorris Rodgers in the coming days. Well, you better hurry up, because Thursday is the day. Anyway, the letter was also the topic of conversation on Sunday evening when some members and senior staff participated in a conference call hosted by Chief Deputy Whip Patrick McHenry of North Carolina, who's running for Whip against Rules Chair Pete Sessions from Texas. According to a source on the call, and that's interesting, if Sessions were to move to that, you'd have a new chairman of Rules. That would be a very interesting thing to see play out as well. According to a source on the call, some members spoke up to urge colleagues not to sign on to the letter. They argued the conference needed to pick its leadership team as soon as possible to move past party infighting. Also a good point. Leaving the field open for even one more week, a recess week at that, could give even more new candidates time to enter the race and further fracture the conference. Delays also create opportunities for existing candidates to shoot themselves in the foot, some members and aides contend. That's true, too. That concern in particular applies to the race for Speaker. Well, it applies in particular to that race because it's happened there, but it really applies elsewhere. I mean, McCarthy's going to win anyway, so really you could be arguing that it applies in particular to the races other than that for Speaker. But, of course, they're referring to McCarthy's comments on the Benghazi Committee. Oversight and Government Reform Chair Jason Chaffetz of Utah officially put himself forward as a challenger to McCarthy on Sunday morning, telling Fox News that McCarthy has a math problem. Florida Republican, what problem is that? I don't know. Florida Republican Daniel Webster, also running for Speaker as a favorite of some members of the House Freedom Caucus who want a leader who will adhere to process and make decisions collaboratively. I hadn't heard that claim about him before. Letting members go home for Columbus Day recess, of all things, in between nominating McCarthy and voting for him on the House floor would be the perfect opportunity for the dynamics on the ground to change, especially if a fourth candidate should materialize, per Kansas Republican Tim Huelscamp's warning last week. It's not clear whether Boehner would have to step down sooner than he had intended. He said he'll leave at the end of the month in order to facilitate a faster election to succeed him. Elsewhere, I guess he wouldn't have to, as long as they have control of the rules process. I suppose you could say we anticipate a vacancy come the end of October, at which point, should that vacancy come to pass, the person who wins this election shall be named Speaker. And I don't think anybody should have any serious objection to doing it that way. It's not clear whether Boehner would have to step down sooner or what would happen if he did. Elsewhere, Lynn Westmoreland of Georgia this weekend was still pushing for a conference vote before Thursday's elections that would force McCarthy to vacate his House leadership position, his House leader position, majority leader, in order to run for Speaker. And in turn, for Steve Scalise to vacate his whip position in order to run for majority leader. A congressional aide said Sunday evening it was still unknown whether Westmoreland's proposed rule change would also apply to Budget Chairman Tom Price, who is running against Scalise for majority leader. Good question. Not necessarily the same type of position. And if that were the case, when would he have to do it? And would the Budget Committee be forced to to suspend its meetings in between then and the election of a new chair? It's a good question, and a good wrench Westmoreland has thrown into the works here. In the midst of all these variables, McHenry told supporters on the conference call that he had secured the votes to win the whip race, and his base of support is continuing to grow, according to a source in McHenry's camp. A source close to Sessions' operation, however, said it was exactly all these moving parts that made it impossible for McHenry to make such a claim. And yet he did. It seems presumptuous to think the race is over with all the questions surrounding the elections. The source connected with Sessions' whip team told CQ Roll Call, "We're in this position as a conference because a critical mass of Republicans believe something needs to change. The idea that a majority of our conference thinks nothing should change and that electing the current leadership team to move up one position is not consistent with the pulse of our conference." It probably isn't, but it's likely to happen anyway because money pretty much determines what these things, the outcome of these things. I don't know how it is as money goes as between McHenry and Sessions. That'd be interesting to check. If it's close call and you can't make the determination based on money, I would guess that perhaps Sessions is at a little bit of a disadvantage in this versus McHenry. I don't think Sessions made himself particularly popular as Rules Committee chair. It's a difficult place to be, rules, and a difficult place to move out of and then up the ladder unless the speaker you served was popular, because the Rules Committee, informally and in almost slangish terminology, referred to among members as the Speaker's Committee. When you're put at the helm of the Rules Committee, in fact, on the Rules Committee at all, you're generally speaking there because the Speaker feels like he or she can trust you to deliver on the rules. Remember, the Rules Committee is the one that's in charge of writing the special rules for the consideration of every bill, and they can change the substantive outcomes of bills based on how they design those rules and how they allow members to vote and on what they will and won't allow members to vote amendment-wise when a bill comes to the floor. So that's an extraordinarily important position. The leadership of that committee is, typically speaking, a hand-picked henchman of the Speaker. However, when you have someone who's a weak speaker or someone who has only barely united a coalition willing to keep him or her speaker, in those situations, occasionally you'll have to give out plum leadership assignments to insurgent factions. I don't think that you could rightly call that to say that that's the case as between Boehner and Sessions. I don't think they were particularly close. I think Boehner preferred other members, but Sessions had Rules Committee experience and was probably willing to subsume his agenda for the time being to Boehner's. But now that Boehner is out and universally declared to be unpopular, if he had a good relationship and a close relationship with Boehner, unless everybody knew them to be buddy-buddy, and that you wouldn't have any room to credibly claim such a thing, then strategically the thing to do is to distance yourself from the Speaker and say, yeah, I'm running against the Speaker's slate that would succeed him. I think we should shake up the leadership and put me in it, but I don't think anybody else out there really thinks of Sessions as being an outsider to the Speaker's slate, so to speak. So I would say he's probably at a disadvantage there. And he likely, in his role as Rules Committee member for years and then chair for the past few, angered a number of rank-and-file Freedom Caucus / Tea Party backbenchers who wanted their own amendments included in the voting, and likely, because of who they are, had come forward with stupid, divisive, counterproductive, and idiotic amendments that the Speaker asked Rules to exclude. And then they would go and testify on behalf of their amendments, and they'd watch Sessions say no. And you're grinding your teeth and saying, I know that the Speaker is directing all of this, but I see Sessions' name on the roll call here. I don't like either of them. So I don't know how well he's going to do with those guys. And to the extent that he sees that coming and begins trying to vote to allow Tea Party and Freedom Caucus amendments without the permission of the Speaker to do so, then, he begins to fall out of favor with the establishment and the Speaker's side of things. And, that may be okay now that the Speaker has toppled. But prior to his resignation, that would have caused him a lot of trouble. And I didn't see that trouble brewing for him. I think he was doing the Speaker's bidding most of this time. All right. Well, I thought that was a pretty fascinating inquiry into the state of the election, and it was interesting to see that they were looking to slow this thing down. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they'll go forward with the Thursday thing. Lynn Westmoreland has a better shot at getting his changes passed, although I think to do so, I think he'd find a lot more people in agreement with his position. The people who would oppose it would be the people who are either already in leadership or on the cusp of entering leadership, who would probably rather not remove that safety net from their climb up the leadership ladder. But they are vastly outnumbered by the rank and file who don't occupy a leadership position, probably will never have to worry about this, and would love to see all the leadership positions swept clean and begin with a new slate on that. But while they may be in agreement with his proposal, when they'll get a chance to propose, debate, and vote on it before Thursday, I do not know. There, again, control of the process controls the substantive outcome. The majority of the conference probably agrees with the change he wants to make. They will simply not be given an opportunity to debate and adopt it, and will instead be faced with only one choice: go ahead and vote under the old system or walk out in protest and don't have your vote registered. That's how process controls the outcome. It would be very different if they were able to just cast a vote on that question. Anyway, let's see. Other things that we might include in the last couple minutes of the show. Well, there's an awful lot. Which direction to go? I don't know. We didn't get to the Carly Fiorina issue, only sort of a light mention on that one. Oh, here's something that I might be able to tease you with tomorrow. This is something we'll have to review tomorrow and take a look at. But another piece in the Hill. Too much reading of the Hill today, in my opinion. But, well, it's a Monday. They do a lot of heavy tweeting in the Monday morning, and I fall into that trap. H.A. Goodman writes a piece. Who is H.A. Goodman? I'm not familiar with H.A. Goodman. Does it say down at the bottom? Just as an author and a journalist. That's not very helpful, but okay. I'm intrigued by the headline. You will be too. Perhaps this stands one of our earlier and continuing themes about the Sanders-Clinton race on its head. 10 reasons Dem superdelegates will, not could, but will, choose Sanders over Clinton. And remember, I believe that the Democratic convention is populated by considerably more superdelegates than the Republicans use. But we were talking about the superdelegates being key to the Trump question on the Republican side. But it's been a while since we considered how crucial a role superdelegates play in the Democratic convention. That will be really interesting, and I'd be curious to see, one, what the reasons are, and two, whether they can really come up with 10 plausible reasons in all of this. But I'd be curious to know why they think that. What would be worth sharing tomorrow? Because remember also, I mean, we keep forgetting, those of you who are super fans of Bernie Sanders probably never forget this, but what an interesting thing it would be for superdelegates. Think about who superdelegates to the Democratic convention are. I mean, to get to be a superdelegate to either party, you got to be a party person through and through. So I'd love to know 10 reasons why party operatives through and through would vote at convention, one of the most important decisions that they're ever called upon to make, to nominate a non-Democrat for the Democratic nominee for president over Hillary Clinton. I mean, not just any Democrat either. So I don't know. We'll have to see whether we think this is a plausible formula that they've put together. But what an interesting question. Well worth doing it. So once again, the Hill breaks through my filter. And we'll discuss that tomorrow. Unless, of course, I completely forget and new events overtake us and we end up discussing those things instead. But anyway, if that happens, well, my fault. Nothing I can do about it. Anyway, what else is going to be discussed today when you stay tuned to the after show? Coming up next, it's Metaphor Monday on the after show, as you well know. Publishing giant McGraw-Hill apologizes for portraying slaves as immigrant workers in Texas textbooks. Leave it to Texas. My God. A California doctor is accused of looting over 30,000 Native American artifacts from tribal and public lands. That'll be a puzzling issue. And the Islamic State, remember them? Has blown up the Arch of Triumph and the ancient archaeological site of Palmyra. Treasures lost to these guys, I can't tell you. But the Taliban used to do the same thing. In the last half today, Justice will be speaking with Tom from the Coffee Cast about Oregon's unique and not so unique history with guns and gun violence, open carry students through the decades, and Oath Keeper Sandy Hook Truther
From Daily
County
Co's
Sheriffs.
Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Thanks for sticking with us through the show today. We'll be back tomorrow. Greg Dworkin will be with us, and you will have a fantastic listening day. Stay tuned for the Connect, Unite, Act, Daily Coast Community Calendar, and all of the above-named stories on the After Show with Wink and Justice coming up next.